Welcome back to the Squiggly Career Skills Sprint. We are on day 8 of our sprint, and today's topic is judgment.
And judgment is one of those skills that I think can feel difficult to figure out, like, how do I get better at this? Like, how do I have better judgment? And though it is definitely a learnable skill, it's one of those where I think we have to break it down a bit to think about, well, how do I improve? Like, what does getting better look like? But I think when you do have good judgment, the benefit for you in your career is that in return, you get really good trust from people. I think people start to trust you to make decisions. They give you more space. I think you have more permission to like play and to make things happen when people see, oh, well, she or he has, they've got smart judgment. They think things through. They see the shades of grey and they get to the right conclusion.
And we were having a chat about the difference between judgment and being judgmental. I think it's a fine line, but a really important one. So if we are chatting and like I'm like saying, I think we should do that because I think that's rubbish and this is my opinion of what we should do, that's potentially quite judgmental because I've not really explained my thinking or how I've got to that kind of idea in my head. Whereas judgment, I would say, as a result of like these bits of information and what I've considered, this is what I think is the best way forward. And when someone understands your thinking, they've got like an insight into how you've got to that judgment. I think there's a bit more understanding for it, maybe a bit more buy-in. So just sort of be aware and maybe spot other people, like this difference between, are they being judgmental about something or are they demonstrating good judgment?
And my idea for action here is when you think judgment is important, so perhaps somebody's asked you to make a decision or you're making a recommendation, I often think your job to do is to try and see that recommendation or decision from lots of different angles to get to a judgment, to get to a point of view. And to be able to do that well, I think you need to press pause. So if you've got to make it, snap judgments are hard, and we know that often snap judgments are often not the right ones. So pressing pause can look like 5 minutes. It can look like sleeping on it. It can look like talking to somebody else before you get to a conclusion. So I often think part of being good at judgment is noticing when you need to sometimes like ask or even just say or signal, I'm just going to press pause on this, or I'm just going to take some time to think. And I was once in some really interesting, like high-level negotiations, like people doing proper negotiation.
Sounds
I was
very
like,
important.
yeah, I was like the least important person in that room by really quite a long way. And I think I really benefited from a leader, who just sort of let me be there and really, I mean, I wasn't adding any value. I was just observing. But what I noticed in there, where actually you got different people kind of all making judgments about what they needed to say, what they were trying to represent, their different kind of points of view, is they were very confident about saying, I'm just going to take some time to think about that. So should we have a 5-minute break? Or I'm just going to sleep on that one and I'll come back to you tomorrow. And then when they got to a judgment, they were very good at explaining the rationale, like why they had got to that judgment. So to your point, it didn't just ever feel like a personal judgment. It felt like they'd done that consideration. I've looked at it, I've looked at the upsides, I've looked at the downsides. I think this is often about having that agility in your thinking, so you can see all those angles, and then you get to a conclusion, but you don't just present it as like it's this. You do take people with you on how they get to that judgment, and then I think you get all of this buy-in. I've seen people be brilliant at this, like they bring you with them on their thinking. Well, I considered that, but this is why I don't think that's quite right. But actually, when we look at it from this perspective, I can see that this would be brilliant for our customers for these 3 reasons. And when you just find yourself nodding, like you're like nodding along now, like I think they're the people. It's sort of a mixture, isn't it, of like judgment and persuasion coming together, and then those people have real impact. I love watching in action because I think it just makes a real difference. You can just see the kind of clarity of thinking, and then those just people have so much power.
Yeah, like our judgment sounds quite different to my judgment.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting like phrase, isn't it? It's like trying to not make the judgment about you.
Yeah.
Where has that judgment come from? It's a collective, or there's a data point, or you're thinking about your customers or your partners or whatever it might be.
Mine is about being aware of your biases. So in terms of my kind of idea for action with judgment, I think that we all have certain biases to how we might approach situations and how we kind of get to our judgment on things. Biases are kind of hard to just get rid of, but I think being aware of your bias helps you to kind of notice, okay, that is what I am bringing to this situation. It is affecting my judgment. What would Sarah do? Okay, Sarah would approach this differently. Or what if we went slower? We didn't speed up, we went slower. So this, I guess, between us, Sarah would say stop, I would say go faster. The bit in the middle is probably what would a slower version of this look like? And just being aware of what bias am I bringing to this judgment? What would the alternative be, helps you to just balance it out a bit. And it means that when you do get to a judgment, it's just a bit more informed. And to your point, I think you get more buy-in from other people because of that. Your bias hasn't led that decision.
And there's a really good HBR article you can read on judgment, which is by Sir Andrew Lykerman. And I took a little phrase from this article that really stuck out to me. He says, be skeptical of information that doesn't make sense. And I just thought, yes. I think partly because I'm quite skeptical, maybe naturally, so that really appealed to me as a phrase. But if you have, I often think of it as the niggles when something doesn't feel right. And then I think that can be something you can communicate as like a judgment. But I think you've got to go beyond the niggle. You can't just be like, oh, this doesn't feel right, so we shouldn't do it. You've got to figure out from a kind of judgment perspective, well, why doesn't this feel right? What is telling me that this isn't the right thing to do? And combined with that article, I was listening to Daniel Kahneman on the Knowledge Project podcast again. And I've listened to that episode a few times because I think Thinking Fast and Slow, one of his books, takes a bit of getting your head around. Yeah. Like you need to listen to it a few times to really understand actually that our instincts are not that good, that you shouldn't trust your gut a lot of the time. Everyone says like trust your gut. You definitely shouldn't trust your gut a lot of the time. So if you're really interested in this and kind of improving your judgment skill, and this feels important to you, I would dive into Andrew Lykerman's work, because that's very specific on judgment, but I would also look at Thinking Fast and Slow.
So that's the end of today's skill sprint. We're back again tomorrow, and the skill we're going to be focusing on is collaboration.